This meeting is being live streamed. The link and login information can be found on the district website. It is also being recorded and will be made available as soon as it is possible. The meeting is called to order. It is January 19th, 2022. The time is 6:37 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Les, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Les. And then can you please call roll?
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Here.
Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Les Green is here. Zach Dorholt. Here. Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Scott Andreasen.
Here.
Following board members are not present: Natalie Ringsmuth, who is absent. Following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office: Superintendent Willie Jett, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education, Dr. Mike Rivard, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, Lori Posch, Executive Director of Operations, Gary Ganji, Media Technicians, Paul Novak and Gordy Scott. The custodian on site is Steve Hain. Following cabinet members and staff are virtually present: Director of Community Engagement and Communication, Tammy Deland, Director of Equity, Ian Omar, Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations, Tracy Flynn Bowe, Executive Director of Research, Assessment, and Enrollment, Donna Roper, Executive Director of Student Services and Special Education, Carol Potter, Executive Assistant, Jan McGuire.
Thank you. And I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's board meeting agenda.
So move.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to remove, the agenda, you're saying.
Yep. You want a second, though, for me?
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Scott and a second by Al for tonight's agenda. Les, can you please call roll?
Scott Andreasen,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Yes. Les Green is yes. Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes. Okay, next up is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of minutes of December 1st, 2021 and December 15th, 2021 minutes. Item B, approval of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $4,493,355.05. Item C, approval of personnel staff changes. Item D, acceptance of grant award donations. Item E, quarterly expenditures for board members October through December 2021. And item F, Catherine Johnson Education Center project change orders totaling $72,392.50. Would any member wish to remove an item?
Madam Chair, I would remove item D, please.
Okay, anybody else? So I'm looking for a motion to approve A, B, C, and E and F.
So move.
Okay, I have a motion by Monica, a second by Scott. Les, can you please call roll?
Scott Andreasen,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Yes. Les Green is yes. Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I will recuse myself for item D.
Then do we want a motion to approve item D then?
So move.
Okay, a motion by Monica and a second by Les. So Les, can you please call roll?
Monica Segura Schwartz,
Yes.
Les Green, yes. Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Zach Dorholt, Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to discussion and action items. We have three. First one up is approval of board policy 504, student dress and appearance as revised. And being presented tonight by Dr. Lori Putnam as the superintendent for secondary education.
Yep.
Go ahead, Lori.
Thank you, Chair Haas. Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Jett. This evening, we are here for the third reading of Board Policy 504, that is student dress and appearance. Based on the feedback received from this board last time, we made the addition. It is the note that would follow under letter D, which is currently the prohibition on headgear. This note reads, "This paragraph will not be applied to students in grades 6 through 12 for the remainder of the 2021-2022 school year only. At the end of this school year, the impact of this change will be reviewed by the administration, and any recommendations for sustained changes to this policy will be brought forward for board review and approval."
Okay, and then we're going to open it up for discussion, and I'm going to give Dr. Les Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to need some help. What I would like to do is put some things up on the screen so that you can read what I'm going to say, and so that I want to read it rather than try to do this off the cuff. Last meeting, I was rather frustrated with, and said some things about whether or not people should learn to do certain things, and I was a little disturbed by it. So I just like to make sure that I do this properly tonight.
So I'll get you up on the board.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'll tell you what, let me do that. Where is the mirroring?
That switch right there.
Right there?
Yep. And then screen mirroring.
One?
That's impressive knowledge.
Oh.
I'm out.
Maximize that and go into that one mode that,
Okay.
you do the show.
Maximize it for me. What do I do? Which one? Why don't you go ahead and do
Can't even
it?
see it here. Go here.
Okay.
And then now I can see a little bit now. it's
Okay, I can do the rest.
slideshow.
I know where it is.
Slideshow.
All right. What you're going to see, first of all, let me see if I can find it. Good gracious. Why does everything have to get so small when I need it? You may not be able to read it because it is still small, but what you have, oh, yeah, what you have up here, first of all, is that what I just want to talk about is the purpose of the policy is, and I'll just read part of it, is to enhance the education of students by establishing expectations of dress and grooming that are related to educational goals and community standards. In general statement, encourage students to be dressed appropriately for school activities in keeping with community standards. And then down farther, with the approval of the building principal, or headgear, including hats and things of that nature, cannot be worn without the approval of the thing. But the point I wanted to make is that IE, I believe, stands for that is, as opposed to for example, and I think the policy ought to say for example in that. And the note below, we understand what that is. So here's my presentation about that. The real problem related to suspension of this policy is that it allows people with the let's all act black solidarity disorder to bully other students. They will use the weaponized stupidity of the phrase acting white as a label to shame and bully students of African slave descent into the conformity of acting black. That is, Or example, wearing hats, hoodies, and do-rags, using speech patterns that feign ignorance and exaggerated walking styles, to name just a few. The argument of our leadership teams appears to be making is that some students do not have the intellectual skill set needed to understand or to follow the community standards, and that teachers do not have the energy, belief, or courage to confront this level of stupidity. They instead want to relieve themselves and other teachers of continuing to teach certain groups of students about appropriate community standards by suspending the school board policy of teaching this group of students about these community standards. In the past, some teachers have disregarded this policy when it required confrontation of students of color. I suggest those teachers can still disregard this policy, but I do not believe we should give them license to stop teaching the appropriate community standards, which can result in poor job interviews, attention by security staff in retail stores, projection of inappropriate behaviors as racial cultural characteristics in public places. Low reading and math scores in high school will cause some harm to students of color, but failing to understand the community standards of the world in which they live will cripple them for life. I suggest the board study the issue for the remainder of this school year. If after legitimate study that indicates the current community standard is outdated, the board can implement a new community standard for the 22-23 school year. I move to reject the administration's recommendation to suspend any part of the student dress and appearance policy at this time. That's it.
I appreciate your words of wisdom and insight and really respect what you have to say. Thank you. That was a lot for me to absorb. So I'm opening it up for discussion here.
There's a motion, need a second?
Is a motion, okay.
Need a second before you can discuss?
Sure, is anybody would like to second that and then,
I'll second it.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
One question that I would have, Les, is you're saying, you suggest the board study the issue for the remainder of the school year if after legitimate study. How is that going to happen? And would it be better to say that you want the administration to study it for the remainder of the school year? Because or is it
Actually-
something that the board would? that you
I
would
don't know.
propose
I mean, the
board?
point of this is that they're going to study the impact. And I don't think you can study the impact personally of what happens in South Junior High to a young black man who gets cornered and says, "You're acting white and you better change." We can't protect my grandson from that, who it's already happened to. The example is that, it's an interesting example, my grandson, my oldest grandson, was home from college and was confronted by his younger brother, who's 12 years old at South, said he was wearing white man's shoes. And they got into a bit of a interesting squabble, but the shoes that my grandson had on were the same shoes that Willie Jett wears. So there's this undercurrent, and at some point, if you get labeled like that, it's a problem. Now, the study, I don't know. I think that the administration was talking about deciding if they could study the impact. I don't know if they're going to see the impact. And I think that people need to think about what happens in the next 4 months to some kids that they can't fix then after it's done.
And I fully support that, Les. I think it was at the last meeting, I was the one who had suggested that we make it a temporary stop, we let it go through the end of the school year and then at least take the time to stop and look and see what the impact is. But I can go either way. I can say, let's not do it until the end of the school year so that we have some time to do that work ahead of time. I feel that the the feedback that I heard and granted, I listen more to the conservative stuff than the liberal stuff. So I hear a different audience than probably half the people. And the audience in my group, or the group that I listened to, was very much against making the change. They say it was giving up, it was giving in to the students, it was not wanting to take on the responsibility, as kind of as you said in here. And so I can go either way. But what I do want, I hear the administration and the people who want to remove that policy, and I hear my colleague, Dr. Green, and his concerns, which I think are real, are very real. And I can live with either way, and I guess I would tend to, because I think that you've been very fair in so many things over the years, and I think that the way that you think is extremely well thought out. I don't think you put stuff out there just because. I would lean towards supporting you in this.
You have your hand up next, and then we'll bounce over to the other side.
So I am confused. So Les, are you asking, the policy was to remove, the suggestion was to remove the policy that established that people has to not wear anything like hats. So by allowing people to wear hats, their black kids are going to be noted as being white? Is that what you said?
Now let me go back and make sure I know exactly what I said. So the real problem with suspension of this policy is that it allows people with the let's all act black solidarity disorder, which I call it, to bully other students of color into acting black, which I'm not sure I know what it is. They use the weaponized stupidity of the phrase, you're acting white, like getting good grades, going to school every day, being respectful in class, participating in school activities is acting white. If that's acting white, then what's acting black? The problem is that if you suspend the policy, if we don't suspend the policy, nobody's harmed. If you do, there are children of color, one being my grandson I'm probably worried about, who will get dirty looks and get phrases thrown in their face that says, you need to fall in line and stop acting like these white boys. And on the weekends and other places, they will have trouble. And that harm will be done. And you won't be able to study it. You won't know what it means. And we'll have kids who are walking around acting like they can't even speak English because they have to talk in a certain way and walk in a certain way and dress in a certain way. My concern is that students of color will be bullied by other students of color because they're now able to wear do-rags for which most of you have no idea what it's for and how they came about, and hoodies and other things, and sit in a classroom and act like that. If they're not, and at some point, if we don't teach young people how to be, what it's going to be like and how to be adults, and when they need to, that when they get old enough and they walk into a bank with a hoodie on to get a job, they're not going to get it, or walk anywhere to get a job. And it's not I mean, if you don't understand how to act in a society, it doesn't mean you have to do both ways. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't learn how to do that. If you want to teach that, my grandson, Isaiah, if you listen to him when he talks to the guys from the football team in the hood, he sounds like he grew up exactly where they did. When he gets with our relatives, he sounds like a Harvard scholar. He's bilingual in that respect. But there are kids who don't have the family background to be able to overcome and learn both of those ways of dealing with the world. And when you take 800 people out of this game that they're going to see 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, who one of their purposes is to teach them how to understand their world and how to manage that world and how to act in that world, then you've taken away every chance they had of access and opportunity to the kinds of things that will help them become ordinary American citizens with ordinary jobs and ordinary medical and dental programs and things of that nature. That's the concern. One of the problems, I'm sorry, you asked me what time it was when I told you how the watch was made. It's a,
What?
we'll talk about it. I'll everybody else, if you're from here, you know what that means, but, I mean, did I answer your question?
You would answer my question. I'm also wondering why did you call me foreign?
Wondered what?
Call me that I'm not from here.
Oh, the comment. If we had a foreign, I'll just tell you the story. We had a foreign exchange student who I taught American slang. He's from Ecuador. Things like piece of cake, he had no idea what it meant. It's a piece of cake, things like that. The concept of asking a person what time it is, and they could say 6:30 or 7 o'clock, but instead of telling you that, what I did was explain how the whole watch was made in that long explanation of a very simple question that you asked. And I was apologizing for it.
Got it. Thank you.
Zach, then Scott.
Just want to point out, I don't disagree with that. I get it. I see that in places. And just separate, I'm going to reiterate my take on this, which is just, if you're not familiar with the kind of theory of reactance, you tell someone to do it and they say no, because they don't like being told what to do. They don't think it's justified, and they dig their heels in deeper. If we can figure out a way, and I'm sure teachers are educated on this, I'm guessing, I'm thinking, then that'd be great. That's what I see as the hang up is still the time teachers have to take to fight what's we kind of call reactance. Still to be separate from all of this, but to be taken into consideration when we move forward with this. And I can send you some studies too to highlight.
Dr. Putnam was the one that initially brought this up. Okay, Dr. Putnam was the one that initially brought this up on a semi-emergency basis. Perhaps you can explain again why she wants the change made.
The reason it was brought forward initially is that when we surveyed our staff and asked them what their main challenges were this year, it was around the wearing of hats and hoods. And when it was brought forward to the leadership teams for conversation, their belief coming out of the schools, and I understand you received 2 emails from staff, but for all of the schools at the secondary, the leadership teams made the recommendation to remove it because they did not see that they were interfering with the educational opportunities of our students, and felt like it was a unnecessary rule that they ended up engaging in power struggles with for students because our teachers are enforcing the dress code. So they would prefer not to engage in that battle with our students. And so that was why I brought it forward for this board's review.
Thank you. Basically, they don't want a power struggle the first hour of the day.
Les, the hats and hoods, do you lump those? Is one different than the other, or is it the same for community standard and expectations and?
I really don't want to nitpick the policy. I think that it was set for a reason, back in the 90s, actually, when there was a problem. And it just simply is a policy that, and if you nitpick that, I mean, why, you get into things like midriff showing or cheeks showing out of short shorts. And there's a lot of things that we have that appear to be worth a power struggle for some students, but not others. So I think that if we just back off, because this is an emergency, it's not an emergency. It's a responsibility, I think, of our educational staff to fight these battles about, for teaching kids what it means to survive and succeed in a society like this. And that if you take away, if you're trying to succeed in this society, you take away some of the stupid arguments that people make about you, like wearing a hood in the middle of the summer, and wearing your pants hanging off your behind, and the things of that nature. If you take some of those things away, which are irrelevant, technically, then you get down to people's real issues then. And if their real issues are race, then you can deal with that. If you find it's really, people are worried about whether or not you will represent them as a salesperson at your business properly, or will just those kinds of things. I think that our responsibility is to teach people how to understand their world and manage it, and have the skill set to be successful in it. And so I think if we don't do anything at this moment and then have some discussion and involve the kids with that, what does that mean? What does it mean to go into an interview with a hoodie on? Or do you understand the difference between an interview and that? Or do you understand the difference between going to a football game and shouting for your team, and when you're in a restaurant and things of that nature? So I just think we don't need, I don't think we need to change the policy now or suspend it. So.
Monica?
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I understand what you're saying, and I agree in several points of what you're saying, Les. I think that you're right about your fears, and your fears about how this can play out. I also think that this is a very stressful year with so many things piled up one into another. And I believe that the concern about teachers and administration not to want to have one more thing to be challenging students is also real. I do think that if our teachers and administration are not teaching students how they are properly dressed for an interview, and we need a policy for that, we are in serious trouble. So I'm hoping that that's what they are doing, and I'm more than hoping, I'm actually trusting that that's what they're doing. I recognize that I can be wrong. I will agree with having a temporary suspension, because another thing is that you propose on a study, but I don't know how you can do a study without trying it out, unless you have a better option to study this situation. But that's my opinion about this.
Anybody else? So Les, I have to tell you, there's a few things on there that because of who I am and where I come from, I can't quite wrap my mind around that, but I respect your insight, And I support your opinion and your take on this. I was ready to approve it for third reading, but respect, again, your insight and what you're saying, and I don't need to have walked in those shoes to know that you're wise and you're bringing some understanding here that I unfortunately can't, so I respect that you brought this forward, and I'll support that. Anybody else want to call roll? So we have a
Read the motion again.
motion and a second to deny the third reading.
What? So
Go ahead. What I'm doing, I prefer that the chair call the roll rather than me,
Sure.
because it's because of the
Okay.
the order of your call is important sometimes. I don't want to do that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Les, and who seconded this?
Scott did.
Scott did. But the motion was that we were just going to, we're not pushing it through for approval.
yeah, that was my question.
As simple as that. We're not, and we're requesting not to come back for a fourth reading or a second, third reading. We're just putting it back to the Board Policy Committee. Is that what the motion is?
Yeah, unless I'm wondering if we could amend that to add that it would be brought back for review by a certain date, or that it would be studied and brought back for review, or something by a date.
Certainly.
My concern last week was that it wasn't going to, that if we just suspended the policy, it would just go away.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make certain that it came back to the board at some point for review, and I think even in this case here, if we do not, then I would say that it's important that it comes back for review after further thought and consideration.
Yeah, I don't have any problems.
So, okay. So do you want to amend your motion then?
Intended to review in, what is it, April, I'm sorry. Review it in April.
Well, how about July?
July's fine.
So school year type thing.
I think you need some time for discussion. Yeah, July's fine. Yeah, the school year won't start till. Good.
Okay.
You want me to call?
Yeah.
Can I,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the review is.
What?
What do you mean? So the motion was to reject the recommendation from the administration about this.
Yep.
What you're sending to review in July? What's that? How is that July is not going to look exactly the same as today? What's going to change from here to July?
If you would like, if I might amend the motion, I suggest the board study the issue for the remainder of the school year. After legitimate study that indicates the current community standard is outdated, that the board can implement a new community standard for 22-23. That can be added to the motion if you'd like it, but that was the point. I don't want the policy changed first, and then we'll see what happens. Let's figure out why we're changing it, and what impact it might have beyond what everybody understands as the life and times of people of color, and then decide how that might impact our school district.
Okay.
Zach?
I'm lacking clarity on the verbiage of the motion on the table. I no longer know what it is. Just looking at what's in red. So I guess, yeah, I no longer know what I'm voting on.
Okay, can you repeat your amended motion?
Well, let me back up and repeat the first motion. My motion was I move to reject the administration's recommendation to suspend any part of the student dress and appearance policy at this time. That's my motion, unamended. we can figure out what to do after that if they would like to take it back to the drawing board,
Okay.
figure something out. But I think that I just don't want the policy change right now.
Okay,
Okay.
so the policy, your motion, the policy is going to stand
We have a
as it was
motion.
before.
Motion and a second.
Second by Scott. Okay, Al, will you please?
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Monica Segura Schwartz.
No,
Al Dahlgren is yes.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have, this is just a discussion item, Student Activity Accounting Report, presented tonight by Amy Scalard, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services.
Yep. That little thing right there?
Dr. Puckman, can you put it on the calendar for review in July then? Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Chair Hawes, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. Tonight is just a information item on student activity accounting. And so there's a few different things that we'll talk about. Student activity funding comes in three primary sources. There's fundraising dollars, donations, and then booster clubs, which are historically for our athletic programs. We're first going to look at fundraising and donations. The fundraising is required to be reported to the board in accordance with board policy. And so you'll see in your board packet a detailed list of those fundraisers to make sure that the board has that comprehensive list. We're not going to go over every fundraiser one by one. We will go over kind of a snapshot of each school and what their fundraising activity was and highlight some of the larger fundraisers. And then the donation information was requested to be presented just in a summary format for the year. Again, we're not going to go into detail on that because all of those individual donations, as far as who the donors were, has already come to the board at the board meetings when you accept those donations on the consent agenda. So first starting off looking at fundraisers and donations. And so we have Apollo and Tech and each activity presented. And there's a second slide. The first slide is focusing primarily on our athletic activities. And then the next slide will look at the non-athletic activities. And so you can see here the total fundraisers and donations for each school for each activity. For Apollo for 2021, the largest fundraisers were in football. That was a t-shirt fundraiser. Track was actually the largest fundraiser for the school, and that was a cookie sale. And then baseball hosts a spring invitational that they generate revenue from. For Tech, football was their largest fundraising source. They did a fundraiser to bring in money for camp, and then they also did a loft fundraiser. And then cross country and Nordic ski also had large fundraisers. Cross country did a dock fundraiser where they took out docks for people. And then Nordic ski did a spruce pot sale fundraiser. Donations, a lot of these donations do come in from LEAF, just as an awareness that the donation amounts do include any funding from LEAF. Again, we're not going to go over all of that in terms of who those came from. If there are individual questions from board members about donations, certainly let me know and we can get you more information. And then looking at the fundraisers for the non-athletic programs, you'll see pretty minimal. A lot of our non-athletic programs are clubs, student service organizations, groups that really don't have significant expenses, and so you don't see really a lot for grants or donations. And then the totals there at the bottom are actually the totals of the two slides combined. So in total, Apollo had just under $8,500 in fundraising, and Tech had just over $12,000. Again, in your board packet is the detailed list that lists each activity and each individual fundraiser that was had, the money that was brought in, if there were any expenses, such as purchasing the items that they were selling, and then what that net amount is. These amounts that we just looked at are the net that they received after taking off any expenses. And then we do also have a number of activities that we know are co-ops. One thing just to point out, this is fiscal year 21 information. So a number of those activities that we've recently talked about who are newly formed co-ops are not listed on the co-op listing because as of last year, both Tech and Apollo had their own respective teams. So baseball, softball, girls basketball are good examples of that. But there were still, a significant number of activities that were co-ops last year. And the largest fundraiser there was dance, which is an annual fundraiser that they do. Fall dance is not a high school league sponsored sport. It's considered more of a club. And they host the dance show as part of that fall season. And that's a fundraiser for the program. So that's what that largest fundraiser was. And then we do also have some activities at the junior high level that have student activity accounts that do fundraising. Again, pretty minimal, but Vex Robotics at North is very active. They have, for the last few years, made it to nationals, which is a trip that they fundraise to be able to go to. And so you see a large fundraiser there for North Vex Robotics, and that was a pizza sale fundraiser. Are there any questions on fundraisers or donations before we go into booster clubs? Okay, so then the last information, the last source of funding that we see come in is our booster clubs. Again, our booster clubs are specific to high school, and our booster clubs are all athletic in nature. We do not currently have any booster clubs that support a non-athletic activity. Apollo has 11 booster clubs, Tech has 13, and then there are 7 booster clubs that service co-ops, and again, that is as of 2021. So those numbers at Apollo and Tech, as we roll into 21-22, you'll see those both go down, and the number for co-ops go up, as we've had a number of those activities that had 2 separate booster clubs previously and have now combined as their sports have moved into a co-op. So total funds raised for boys teams at Apollo, $35,548. Girls teams, $15,133. And then we show the co-op, the co-ed teams, which are minimal. Our only co-ed teams that have booster clubs are our only co-ed teams, period, are cross-country, Nordic ski, track, and adapted activities. And there's really minimal booster club activity. There's a very small parent group for adapted, and then the other activities have pretty inactive booster clubs, and some don't have any. So that's why you see the significant difference in funds raised for co-ed teams is just because a lot of those co-ed teams do not have booster clubs. Total for Tech, funds raised for boys teams, just under $27,000. Funds raised for girls teams, $22,600. And then again, you see the co-ed at $2,800. And then the co-op activities, funds raised for boys teams, $28,600. Girls teams, $41,700. So the totals then are shown there for each of those columns. And then the next step in evaluating this to ensure Title IX compliance is to look at the participation. Because we do know that historically, our district has had higher participation in boys' sports than in girls' sports, partially just because of the sheer numbers in some of those sports, such as football, which tends to generate higher numbers and isn't a cut sport, whereas some of the other sports, cut and participation is limited. So when we look at the activity participants, again, these are last year's 2021 data. In total, for boys participants, there were 623 across both high schools and the co-op activities, and then girls, 539. So when we look at that amount spent per participant between boys and girls from Booster Club spending, really very even. Boys comes out to $146 per participant, girls $147. And again, the co-ed is significantly lower. However, that's because a lot of those activities either fundraise through the district and not necessarily their booster clubs, or they don't have a booster club to support that activity. Are there any questions on the booster club expenditure activity? So that is all I have in terms of the recap of the activity for our student activities, unless there are questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Amy? Well, thank you for putting those numbers together and doing the break in the genders to show equity there. I appreciate that very much. I know that we have athletic directors working diligently to increase participation numbers, and their efforts, are being noticed. So I hope to see we can see those girls' numbers, participation numbers coming up.
Absolutely. And we do have our activities directors as a regular part of their annual check-in with coaches and as part of that annual review, requesting the Booster Club spending information now at the end of each year and making it clear so that we're not having to try to go back after the fact when Booster Club personnel might change over. We just want it to be clear with the coaches and the parents up front, and make sure that the coaches know that in terms of providing that information, that's a direct chain between the Booster Club and the district. We just rely that the coaches let us know when that turnover happens so that we can reach out to Booster Club parents, build those relationships, and make sure that they're comfortable sharing the information with us and that we get it in a timely manner.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Thanks, Amy. Okay, next up, another last discussion item for the night. We have evolution of arts and activity offerings, presented tonight by Lori Posch, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, and also Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education.
Good evening, Chair Haas, board members, and Superintendent Jett. Tonight, Dr. Putnam and I are going to talk with you about how our arts programs, our art content, and our activities programs have changed over the last few years to meet the needs of our changing community, and also to meet the needs of our students as we look at who they are. We're going to start out with our arts, and as you know, arts is a content area. It's a required area by the state, but it also blends over into some of the activities areas. As we look at our arts programs, we know that we are continuing to adapt to those changes. And we also all agree that our arts programs really contribute to a well-rounded student, a well-rounded contributor to society. And they also help build skills in several other content areas and in skill areas. So we know that students who participate in the arts often have higher reading scores and math scores. I'm going to ask you to take a walk back in time with me, back to the years of the school year 2016-2017. And those of you who have been on the board or who have followed may recognize this visual. This was the year that we did a real in-depth look at our fine arts program through our curricular review cycle. This is the year that it came up for review. Stephanie Peterson at the time led this very, very thorough review. When we started it, we looked at both the opportunities and the outcomes that we wanted to get from this review. We knew that we wanted to develop consistency in our arts programs from our pre-K through our 12th grade. We wanted to look at new opportunities that might exist with the new construction of tech. That seems like so long ago. We wanted to make sure that we included the new ESSA language that defined a well-rounded education and specifically included the fine arts for the first time in language. We wanted to improve equity of our arts programs to meet the needs of all of our students. We know and we recognized that our arts programs are a potential attractor to our District 742 schools, and we wanted to look at how we could better enhance that. And we know that kids thrive with quality arts programs. Our timeline, as you can see, was designed to be the first part of that curricular review cycle where we did the in-depth study, the research, and then we moved towards implementation in the 2018-19 school year. We really wanted to make sure that we involved large numbers of people in this review process specifically. So as we formed our committees, we had 57 people who served on our committee, our review committee. They included teachers, building leadership, district leadership, members of our universities, Paramount, Central Minnesota Arts Board, Boys and Girls Club, Great Theater, and parents, just to name a few. This committee did in-depth research around quality arts programs and the benefits of arts programs. They did site visits to several schools in the state that had been identified as having quality, high-quality arts programs. That included Elk River, Eastern Carver County, Osseo, Minneapolis, Burnsville, and Eagan. And an in-depth data review. We looked at registration, we looked at demographics, we looked at performance, a very, very, very thorough review. And we looked at, as I said, the demographics from 2013 to 2017. In that time period, between then and now, there's been some changes at the state level. So the fine arts standards were revised and then delayed. So the standards that are out there are considered 2018 standards. They were developed to be implemented in 2018. And then the state put a pause on it, and another pause, and another pause. So they are now slated to be implemented in the 2023-24 school year. So that has kind of made us wait and revamp and relook at some of our art standards. Al?
The fact that they keep delaying the implementation of the standards, is there something in there that's very controversial that is making them hold it back, or is it for some other reason?
There is nothing controversial in them. What started was with the first delay, the standards are never implemented the year MDE says they're going to be. So we always know that when they say it's going to be implemented in a year, it will probably be 1 to 2 years after that. And then COVID, the pandemic hit, and all of the standards were put on hold. So it has just moved. It's really hit our arts standards. Yep. The other thing that the state did is they have switched all of our content areas to now be on a 10-year review cycle. And that's important to note as some of our policies come forward at the next meeting. So that's a big change. Monica?
One related question about that is that when I have been seeing some of the issues with arts offerings, is that they are competing for time with like physical education, for example, in certain areas. And I just wondering how that play out with the implementation of the standards or with, in general, the ability to have these offerings.
And I'll touch on that a little bit later on too. But they actually don't compete with FIAD because of the state requirements for graduation. So I'll skip down to well, let me do areas and then I'll do requirements, if that's okay. So as I've presented over the last couple of years, there are 5 areas that are included in fine arts. Those areas are dance, media arts, music, theater, and our visual arts. And I want to touch on our media arts because we haven't really talked about that one a lot. Our media arts include things like corporate marketing and how arts are applicable to corporate marketing. It includes examples that they give from the state, set design using light and movement, app design. So it's really the application of using media to express the art skills of students. So it's a really interesting area that we want to look at and explore a little bit further than we have in the past. So the requirements at the state level, if you remember, at high school we have to offer 3 of the arts areas and require 1. So Monica, when you talk about the competing with FIAD, we have the FIAD requirement and we have the fine arts requirement. So they really don't compete. It's student choice in any of our elective areas after they have that 1 requirement. So they're required to get 1 credit, and then the rest are electives. Another change that is out there right now that we're watching really closely is at our elementary and middle school, because as we've talked about before, it was always that we need to offer 3 of the 5 and require 2. But in a 2021 state statute, they have changed that language now to say 3 of 4, and they've removed media arts in that. However, the media arts are still in the standards. So we're watching that change at the state level very closely to see what will come next with that. As you know, our curriculum review cycle doesn't stop after evaluation. So in the 2017-18 school year, we continued with the evaluation and with the piloting, kind of watching what was happening with those delayed standards. We continue, as I said, to monitor that to meet the needs. In the 2018-19 school year, and you may remember, those of you who were on the board or watching, we brought forward some recommendations from the committee for fine arts. Those recommendations really focused around our elementary programming being our foundational years, building the foundation for all of our arts programs. Middle school being exploration, so exploring some of the different opportunities that are available through the arts. And then when our students reach high school, being able to go more in depth or to start a pathway in that area. As we looked at recommendations, the committee decided and recommended, and we agreed, that we would try to build both a north side and a south side pathway. If you remember, we used the analogy of a varsity coach and how that coach really reaches down and introduces and builds up their program. So by the time they get to that varsity level, that high school level, they know the students, they know the experience, they've introduced their sport to others, and it's the same with the fine arts. So we really wanted to build that pathway. At that time, we increased our staffing at our high school level so that we had a 1.0 choir, a 1.0 orchestra, and a 1.0 band, and asked that they reach down to elementary and middle school and build their program from the bottom up. And we kept that staffing level the same for 2 years for them to be able to do that. We also talked about building music on-ramps. So rather than students only being able to start an instrument at 1 grade level, we wanted to make sure that our students could start at any grade level. And we did that at our middle level, and then our high school music teachers brought forward an introductory band and an introductory orchestra so that students could start an instrument at the high school as well. And we looked at staffing for success, knowing that our beginning players maybe needed some more time, and that we had equity at all of the sites. We wanted to really work on developing a drama or a theater pathway. The other recommendation was that we make sure that our teachers and our students have access to tools, whether that be instruments or materials, and that we continue to develop our community partnerships around our fine arts. In the 2019-2020 school year, Our teachers came back to us because there had been changes in curriculum. There had been more online tools developed in the area. There had been some new programs that came out. So they asked if we could re-examine our curricular resources and look at some that they were interested in. We created a music and visual arts lead teacher position so that we actually had a music teacher and an art teacher who served as members of our learning and teaching team. We did an in-depth staffing review. We looked at course registrations and staffing members assigned to those positions. And then the spring came, and music recruiting was hampered. Our numbers went down, partially because of the recruiting efforts, but our teachers were creative. They reached out, they created a recruitment video that could be shown at the different levels to introduce the instruments since they couldn't physically bring the instruments to the students. They, I'm drawing a blank on some of the other things, but they really reached out to our students through, if you remember, our students were online at that time, and reached out through those online platforms to be able to introduce to our students. In the 2020-21 school year, we started out virtually. We were able to combine funds from a lot of different resources. We provided art supplies for all of our students to use at home so that they continue to have those hands-on experiences at home. We purchased band masks when our students came back in person. At first, they were disposable ones that the slit was cut in while we waited for cloth ones to be made. One of our music teachers had a relative who made cloth bell covers for the ends of instruments, really making sure that we were following all of the guidelines about being able to continue to play instruments safely. At the end of the school year, our band instruments with the mouthpieces needed a real in-depth cleaning. We also heard from our band teachers that having the instruments at home for so long really took a toll on our rental instruments, the instruments that we had. Typically, our band and our orchestra teachers are looking at those instruments on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that they're working. And when our students were home, they weren't able to do that. So we used some of our COVID relief funds and had all of our band instruments cleaned real thoroughly and repaired so that they were ready for this year. Dr. Putnam and I met with all of our music teachers on a real regular basis last year. They brought forward some suggestions for us, some challenges that they were facing, and we listened carefully. Out of those conversations, we did things like hire a para for our middle level band to help with the increased numbers at that level. We agreed to keep staffing levels at the same for this school year, even though our registration numbers were looking to be down. And through negotiations, we negotiated a stipend for our directors of ensemble groups. So a lot of good things came out of those conversations. And then we agreed to a contract for this school year for the cleaning, the continued cleaning and repair of our band instruments. That leads us into the 2021-22 school year. We do have those band repair maintenance contracts in place with 2 music stores. One is doing our woodwinds and one is doing our brass. This year at the beginning of the year, Leah Sams, remember, talked to you about our pathways, our career and college pathways. And all of our teachers at the beginning of the year took some time to look at how their content built employability skills for the students in their content area. So our fine arts teachers looked at what they do in their classes that build critical thinking skills, creativity, communication, collaboration, and curiosity. And their boards that they brainstormed were full of ways that our fine arts help our students be productive in their future jobs. The stipends I already mentioned that were put in place this year. We also have some consultations taking place. Kara Mather, who is our lead music teacher, reached out to Ayan, our equity director, about how we can better diversify our music courses, because we know that we do have that discrepancy in that area. I've been talking with a community expert about theater opportunities, somebody who has a teaching license in theater and is willing to lend us some time to really look at how we could build that program. Marketing, you probably have seen and heard many times the wonderful marketing that takes place around our fine arts programs. We know that our fine arts programs are a showcase of our school district, of the talent that our students have. So you see blogs, you see news articles, you hear Superintendent Jett in his updates giving information out about the successes of our fine arts programs. We know that our fine arts programs bring our community into our schools, which is a huge marketing piece for us as well. We're hoping this year that our outreach and marketing to our 5th and 8th graders can happen in person so that they can see and touch and feel the instruments. One of the neat things that I just want to make sure I shared with you, one of the barriers that our teachers recognized was concert clothing, and that some of our students couldn't afford the concert clothing, the all black that is worn. So they created a clothing closet this year. They went out and bought some clothing that students can pick from to reduce that barrier. The other thing I don't want to forget is that we also added an additional orchestra room at Apollo this year so that they have their own space, and it's beautiful if you haven't seen it yet. So upcoming, what's next? Again, we don't stop because we're not in that thick of the curriculum review. Next year, we will be creating a district-wide consistent procedure for looking at the rental fees of our students who qualify for educational benefits. So what's typically, or what used to be known as, free and reduced lunch. We'll be making sure that we have that consistently applied across the district. We're looking at adding that into Skyward to make it easier for parents who rent our music instruments. And again, that's the only fee that there is for the course, is if they choose to rent one of our instruments or use one of our instruments versus one from one of the stores. We also will be hopefully looking to implement the new standards. We continue to review and work on those every year. We really want to make sure that we explore thoroughly the theater and media arts pathways and look at some possible new course offerings for that. And then again, that continual review to reduce barriers for our students. We want to continue to review our data and make sure that we have real measurable goals for each of these areas. The next slide I've labeled investments, because it truly is an investment in our children when we invest in our fine arts areas. We have multiple budgets that we use for fine arts. We have the learning and teaching budget. I mentioned that we had some COVID relief dollars. We've used Title II dollars. We've used district capital funds. So a lot of different funds are used to support our fine arts. For course offerings, we have added courses to better meet the needs of our students. For our visual arts, we aligned our pathways to be a 2D and a 3D pathway. We created the Creative Expressions course, which was really designed as a theater course, a spoken word course, but we've had difficulty finding a licensed teacher for that course. So it's evolved a little bit into, in order for us to keep our teachers full-time, having our music teachers cover some of those courses. We have drumming options, making music, which is a non-performance opportunity for students, songwriting, guitar, beginning band, and beginning orchestra. And then our human resources, oftentimes one of the most important pieces. As I mentioned, we upped the high school FTE for 2 years in order to recruit students into our music programs. This year, again, we decided and agreed to not decrease the high school FTE based on lower enrollment. We've invested in curriculum writing time, and last year, the paraprofessional for our band, middle level band. Curriculum and PD. I'm just going to list these off quickly. New programs that we have purchased for our arts programs, and that includes music, visual arts, and creative expressions. We have smart music, sight reading factory, music play, game play, methods books, iPads in our elementary music classes, and music staff book study books. We also have a program called, oh, now it's gone, I should have written it down. Arts of Education University, which is an online resource for our arts programs where they can receive professional development and lessons that they can use with the students. It's just an amazing program. And capital that we've added in addition to curriculum, we've added 2 kilns, a clay mixer, instruments at all levels, which included increasing that supply for low-fee rentals, and then creating that orchestra room at Apollo. When I added up quickly since our review process, for learning and teaching expenditures, we have spent a little over $38,000 for our art programs, but when we add in other district-level budgets, that's almost $78,000. For our music program from our learning and teaching expenditures, we have spent $114,000. And when we include, not including the Apollo Orchestra Room, but when we include other budgets, that's over $211,000. So we have made that financial commitment and investment in our fine arts programs. When we look at our top 3 music vendors, and we include our district and our building budgets, so that's things like repairs, it's piano tuning, it's the purchasing of arts and music instruments, we have spent over $927,000 since the 2016-17 school year. So definitely investing in our arts programs. And I want to end with celebrations before we go into activities. As I mentioned before, you hear about many of these and you see them in reports, on social media, in the news. Our fine arts programs give us so much to celebrate. We have had many, many students and teachers who have been noted and acknowledged for their accomplishments and awards that they've been given. We have been the recipient of many grants. One that you might remember is our Lincoln Arts Integration Grant a few years ago. And then we have had many community partners who have stepped up and have agreed to partner with us in the arts. LEAF being one of our main investors and partners, but our District 742 Youth Choir that we partnered with Community Education. Our St. Cloud State, the St. Cloud Art Crawl that our students participated in, an art display at Capital One, and I could go on with all of the celebrations. So I'm going to close there with our changes. We know that arts don't just happen in the classroom. They continue both inside and outside of the school day. And that's our segue for Lori and activities.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's my pleasure to take you on a review of activities over the last 5 to 7 years and how those have changed to meet the needs of our students. One of the primary questions we ask ourselves is, how do we get the most students possible to engage in activities? Our answer is to remove barriers to participation. I'd like to share some of the ways that we are removing barriers for our students. Our participation fees are structured such that students who qualify for educational benefits pay a significantly reduced rate for athletic and academic activities. We also have a cap for families that have multiple children participating so that there's only a certain amount that families have to pay for the entire year. This year, to generate student interest in activities, students are able to attend games that are located in our own facilities for free. And we are also working on a way to provide a reduced price pass for families of participants who qualify for educational benefits, because we certainly don't want a barrier for our families to be able to enjoy the activities of their children. We do hope to roll this out next year, and you'll be hearing more about that. We began offering waivers for free sports physicals a few years ago, and this has helped. However, this summer we hope to offer on-site free sports physicals so that transportation is not a barrier. Speaking of transportation, as you are aware, We did begin offering transportation home from middle school activities quite a few years ago, thanks in part to LEAF. They kicked us off with some generous funding, and we've picked it up since then. And that change did boost participation. So this year, we're trialing after-school activities transportation home for our high school students, and that's something that we are monitoring throughout the year to see the impact that that makes. Thanks to a partnership with the YES Network, we can offer hot meals to all activities participants across each of our secondary schools. This ensures students will never leave practice hungry. This year, we committed to adding staff due to participation rates were needed rather than cut. We are responding to the demands of our students. We added a coach to the boys tech soccer team, which for the first time in our history, we had 4 teams at the high school level. And we also added an art advisor at Apollo when numbers topped 35. Finally, we are working diligently to diversify our coaches, advisors, and participants. We knew that students being able to see themselves reflected in their teammates and the staff who are working with them engages our students and draws them in. We know that our students may not be exposed to the many activities offerings that our district provides. This can be for a variety of reasons, including the specialization of one-sport athletes, poverty, or home traditions. One of our goals is to inspire students to try new activities. This year, we set expectations with each varsity coach that they would find ways to engage younger students in learning their sports. Many of our coaches, of course, have done this already, but with a clearly defined expectation now, we're seeing increased outreach. Above, you can see Apollo Eagles football players leading coaching clinics with our young upcoming students. We know it's imperative that we create connections and expose our elementary students to the kinds of activities that they'll be able to participate in when they reach middle and high school. To that point, we also offered a sports sampler, as you know, for our 6th graders this year. The sampler provides our students with the opportunity to try out those 7-12 sports that they would otherwise be able to access at the 6th grade level. It was quite a hit this fall. We have seen a drop in participation numbers for the winter season, but we do hope that those will rise again for the fall, and we are doing active recruiting. Outside of the sports sampler, we're also inspiring our students by giving them access to more opportunities at the middle level. This year saw the startup of Girls Who Code at North and Math Club at South. Also new this year is Majorettes, which is being piloted at Apollo High School. This club provides opportunity and instruction for students who want to dance but haven't had formal training. Activities are education. Students are always learning new skills through activities participation, regardless of what they're taking part in. However, the past years have seen an increase in the types of activities students have had to choose from, and we are intentional about keeping up with current technology and meeting the needs of today's youth culture. Featured in the middle of this slide are images from the Tech Morning Show. This student-led broadcast, supported by Dr. Matt Kyle, provides students the opportunity to learn writing, broadcasting, and videography skills while contributing to the overall positive climate and culture of Tech High School. Within the last few years, we also began offering e-games as an after-school club. E-games provide students a chance to test their skills against their peers. However, we do offer a more traditional games club, which is featured here on my left, and that's been around for about the last 3 to 4 years. Our activities offerings have also adapted to changing times in other ways. For example, National Honor Societies of both Apollo and Tech provided online peer tutoring while we're in distance learning last year, and the Tech students called theirs Tech After Hours, which is the photo you see here. We are preparing students by creating equitable access to opportunities. One of our goals over the past few years is to provide students at Tech and Apollo the same opportunities to participate in activities. An example of this is the newly formed speech team at Apollo, who I just have to say won their meet this past weekend, so shout out to the Eagles. And it's been quite some time since our Apollo Eagles had the opportunity to be part of speech. We formed a trap shooting team at Tech after the sport began at Apollo a few years ago, and 2 years ago made the adjustment to allow both Apollo and Tech to do musicals each year rather than have to alternate years. Another example of this is the work that we did this summer as a community to develop our co-ops. knowing that students' opportunities to participate in a full range of activities would be jeopardized if we didn't make the hard decision to co-op. We engaged in a process of listening and creating opportunities for students across our district. While we are still gathering participation data, fall participation was higher than it has been in past years, and our winter teams have full rosters. Empowerment through activities means we help students feel stronger and more confident in exploring options and trying new things. Through aligned efforts, coaches, advisors, principals, and district administration have found ways to empower our racially, culturally, gender, and sexually diverse students in activities. In 2017, our Apollo Girls Swim and Dive team included Muslim students for the first time in our history. Then Coach Alex Badger, AD now, made sure to make connections with families to provide support, and the student captains changed the team's uniform colors to match the girls' swim hijabs. As a district, we have purchased sport hijabs for soccer, basketball, and other activities at middle and high school. In 2019, we began GSAs at all of our middle schools. Since then, we've created intentional connection between middle and high school students involved in this activity. We know that building community is important when empowering our students to feel safe and comfortable in who they are. While we have not added any DAPE teams, our DAPE teams are thriving, and that's our adaptive activities. They are thriving and tend to pretty much win each season, so go them. We know based on student participation numbers in service clubs such as We Act, student advisors, ambassadors, Web, and Link Crew, many of our students want to give back to their communities. And this year, we're partnering with Rotary to begin Interact Club at both Apollo and Tech. This opportunity, the opportunity that Interact Clubs provides is to bring young people together to develop both their leadership skills and show them how to discover the power of service above self. Mentors from the St. Cloud Rotary are helping develop our students' leadership capacity, and we are grateful to them for their partnership. And that is the conclusion of our presentation on the evolution of arts and activities in our school district to meet the changing needs of our students. We welcome any questions you may have.
Monica, then Les.
So when we talk about activities and we talk about art, sports, and then things like speech, or I don't know where I put games, that the games part. It seems like there is competition, but I don't think that there is development of physical strength or so how those things go together, because I think that students need all of them, but I do think that students are encouraged to choose or have the ability to choose between one or the other. So how students get the encouragement to get in all of them or to try all of them at some point in their student life, and when is that point?
That is a great question, and it's something that we all want to solve. We certainly want our students to be engaged in a wide range of activities and not specialize in any one thing very early. So at our middle level, we do push the exploratory option. Students can engage in 4 different activities beginning from fall to spring. We have offered Main Street activities fairs in the last year at our open houses, so that our families and our students can see the wide range of activities offered. There is a competition, right? Because you can only do one thing per season, and a lot of it depends on what your friends are doing, what your teachers encourage you to do, what you know, and that's one of the reasons we're putting so much effort into exposing students early, so that when they do have to make a choice, they at least know what their choices are.
Can I add one thing to that? Because when you say that they can only participate in one thing per season, yes and no. So I can be participating in band or orchestra or choir, and I can still be on the swim team, the track team, basketball. And I do know some students that are in music, they're in a sport per se, and they're in a club. And so it feels like it's one per season, but I'm just making sure that everybody hears it. It's not. There are students that when you look at the student resume when they're applying for a college or a university, I sit there at times and say, and how are they doing that? And they have a full-time job. And so we have some students that do some incredible things that are completely immersed in trying and doing everything. But at the same token, that is the goal, is to try to make sure that they're exposed to everything at that young age and that they can try a little bit of everything. So I just need to add that part.
Lori, 8 years ago, that Lori, LAU. 8 years ago, I sat in the South Junior High concert because my grandson was in the band. And there were, pardon? 9 years ago, I guess. God, they go so fast. 9 years ago. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And there were 3 students of color in that configuration. I was at the concert last month, 54 students of color in choir, orchestra, that's the strings, and band. What happened?
She's going to look at me to take that. That, as I mentioned in 2016-17, that was one of the recommendations that came out of our review committee. Because when we looked at our demographics, we knew that they were not even close to being representative of our students. So it's been a real conscious effort on the part of our teachers to reach out to students to make those connections. We're not there yet. We're going to continue, and as I mentioned, Kara has reached out to ION for some more support in that, but it has been a very conscious effort. I think one of the other things that our music teachers are really exploring is how to make those connections and to create that interest. So it's not just looking at numbers, it's looking at how to truly engage, how to change instructional practices, how to change the materials that we're using. It's been intentional.
Thank you.
What's the feedback been on the marketing programs that were put forth this year? Like the signs and the billboards and things like that we've done? Has there been any? I have a couple of comments on it, but go ahead and tell me yours first.
We've gotten exceptional feedback on the signs, the yard or window signs specifically. Our students are excited to get them and our parents are excited to get them. I have not received feedback on the billboards.
My comment is just that, and it was on the yard signs also, but as disappointed as I get when I drive through St. Cloud and I see Storm and Sabre and whatever, I always think, oh, those kids should be going to our school. When you drive through Sartell, I'm surprised at the number of eagle and tiger signs that you see in the yards in Sartell, which I didn't expect. So right there, I think, is a really good outcome of having those yard signs. It sends, we hear too often in the media of all the kids that open and roll out of our district, but that is a testament to the number of students that open and roll into our district, and it's right in people's face every day, and I think it's great. I thought the whole campaign was really good. I don't think I saw a billboard. They're tough. You gotta be.
We went for radio ads instead,
Okay.
if I recall
Okay.
correctly.
Okay. That could be why I didn't see a billboard, so it's a good thing. But overall, I thought it was a really good approach.
Thank you.
Well, I have some thoughts on both the athletic side and the activity side. On the activity side, it's we get a brand new gym at Tech and brand new theater at Tech, and I know the theater at Apollo is 50 years old. How is that working out for equity between the schools?
That's a really good question, Scott. And I know that each of us sitting here would like to have equally new facilities on both sides of town. We are, however, putting effort into making sure that facilities don't impact or impede any of the opportunities for our Apollo students. So if there have been any issues that have come up, I can give an example, thinking specifically about softball. As we were preparing for our co-op team to play, the softball coaches pointed out some concerns in the grounds, and we were able to make the corrections. There were some issues that came up with the theater, and we were able to make some of those fixes and were able to install a new light sound system. So we are being really diligent about making sure that we keep up the facilities that we have on both sides of town, and then making sure that our students aren't negatively impacted in any way, just because one happens to be brand new and one is 50 years old.
Okay. One of the wonderful attractions are musicals, the combination of both theater and music departments. For many years, we've done an alternation between the two high schools. Is there any thoughts about maybe having a musical at each high school, and maybe just alternate times of the year? And what's the expense and income side of this?
Thank you. Absolutely. Knowing that was a concern, we did make that adjustment probably about 2 years ago, so that both schools could offer musicals every year. And while they are more expensive, they are such a wonderful opportunity to combine musical, theater, and art, or music, theater, and art, that we thought it worth the investment for our students on both sides of town. And then, of course, they do bring in more revenue because, as you say, they are highly popular.
Okay, this year, I think it was only at Apollo with Goodbye Whoever. For next year, is there going to be one at each school then?
They certainly have the opportunity. As you may know, Tech was the longtime theater director at Tech resigned his position, and which was a huge loss to that Tech community. He and his family have done a beautiful job there for many years. So we're in a transition period this year, and that's a lot to take on for a brand new theater director. So we hope that they've got their feet under them and are ready to tackle that challenge in the coming year.
Okay. On the sports side, we have physical education. What do we teach in physical education, and how does that relate to the sports outside of physical education?
It depends on the level and what's taught. Just like any of our other contents, there are state standards that we follow. A lot of it is introducing students to different physical opportunities. We do a lot with Fitness for Life. So when we get up into the high school, what are activities that help us remain healthy and fit for life? So at the high school, we have some different electives that students can take. We have net games, we have Fitness for Life, just a wide variety. Again, like we do with our arts programs, it's introducing students at an early age, and then having the opportunities in both middle school and high school then for them to go more in depth in a FIED, a physical education area that they're interested in. So direct tie-in, it's the introduction and then the follow-through.
That kind of similar to your Inspire program for fifth graders, was it? Sixth graders? Where you had different sports being introduced?
Yes, very similar. And some of our coaches will even go into the FIED classes. I know some of our tennis coaches go in, and our wrestling coaches were talking about it. And so they even will push in during the day if they have that opportunity to build skill and exposure.
I'm aware that Tech has a really good wrestling system. It's more than just the sport in high school. It seems like a club activity around that. How do they interact?
The club aspect and the activity.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that they are mutually beneficial. I think you see it in baseball, you see it in basketball, you might see it in gymnastics. So I think that there are lots of examples of how our community engages our littles, and we start to build that skill early, and then they will often transition to either playing in the off season or moving to the varsity or JV sport at the high school.
Okay. In athletics, winning seems to be everything, but is it? I mean, you want to have kids participating too. For example, my daughter in 5th grade went out for basketball. She's very enthusiastic about that. But she wasn't the best on the team. And whenever she did finally get a basket, they said, go sit down.
I'm sorry for that experience. And winning is winning everything. It depends on who you ask. I think Superintendent Jett and I might have different answers on that. Not being a very competitive person myself, but we work hard to. And as we are having our activities coordinators in place, we've been very clear that the goal of those programs isn't to win. Is winning nice at the middle level? Absolutely. And as we go through the years in our sports, certainly winning is a draw, right? It brings more participants in. But at the middle level, we just want kids to engage, have fun, learn skills, and stick with it.
Okay. About all I can say is they go sit down and didn't bring her back for another year.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
Speaking of equity between two high schools, one of the things that I hear continually about, and it seems to be really, really popular, is that Tech Morning Show. And they have the green screen room and production facilities. Is there a equivalent for that at Apollo? And if not, given the popularity of it, and not to forego the tie-in to St. Cloud State University, who has a tremendous program for media and just and they put just the whole thing they do with Channel 29 and the Huskies and all those broadcasts and kids moving on into the big time after going to school there. Is there something that could be done at Apollo to bring it up to the same level as what's done at Tech? Let me ask that way.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't received that request from Apollo, and some of it depends on student interest and advisor interest. There are certainly some programs that happen at Apollo that aren't yet at Tech. But to your point, we could absolutely find the space and the equipment to be able to make that happen at Apollo also.
Did it happen at Tech prior to the new school at that level?
No.
So I think that might be an area where the facilities drove the program, and it would probably be the same thing at Apollo.
Anybody else? This was a great presentation. Thank you very much for all the intentional work, the digging in and caring enough to look at it and say, what can we do differently? Eliminating barriers in those activities, really, to get families to be able to watch the games, that's important. Those are heartbreaking stories and situations where we have kids that, can't afford to rent the instrument, and you guys are figuring out that, let's make this happen. Get these kids involved. So thank you very much. I know it's not easy and it makes your job more difficult, but that's what makes us great, and we appreciate you guys doing this. Okay, thank you. All right, next up then, moving right along here, Superintendent report presented by Willie Jett, Superintendent to 742.
Good evening, Chair Hawes and members of the board. So first off, I'd like to start. The District Administration Office collected winter items for transitional education as their Do Good Together project over the holidays. The items included winter coats and clothing, boots, hats, gloves, and miscellaneous items to keep students warm this winter. I'd like to say a big shout out and a thank you to the staff and the DAO. Second, at the end of last week, we received guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education allowing school districts to transition to a shortened quarantine period for COVID positive and symptomatic students. Our district leadership team reviewed the new information and consulted with health professionals to establish new protocols. Beginning tomorrow, we will follow the recommended 5-day quarantine for students. This information was shared with families and staff this afternoon. Next, after consulting with local health officials from Central and the Stearns County Health Department, we are extending the mask requirement through the end of trimester 2, which is March 4th. We will revisit the decision to require universal masking at that time. We appreciate, again, the partnership of our students, families, and staff in this effort. And last but not least, one of the recently, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently, one of the recently featured videos for 742 Together for the month of January, it focuses on Faizeen Ahmad, a tech senior who created Sounds of Sunday. Sounds of Sunday is comprised of tech music students who visit County Manor monthly to provide music and company to the elderly. Earlier we were talking about the fine arts, and here's an example of the fine arts program. Gary.
I really got into violin in 5th grade, so my brother played. I really got into violin in 5th grade. So cello, he's 3 years older than me, and he played cello when he was in 5th grade, and my parents actually really hated lugging around the cello. And so like they kind of pushed me to violin. I'm really happy that my parents first pushed me into it, and then I kind of continued on my own. Well, NHS is National Honor Society, probably one of the higher honors that a student at Tech can receive. And it's really an organization that emphasizes community service and making our school a better place. So my idea for Sounds of Sunday really came in March of 2020. When obviously a lot of things changed, when my orchestra teacher, Mrs. Mather, reached out to all of us orchestra students to ask for recordings so that she could send them to some of the Benedict Senior Home. And so me and my brother, cello, violin, we recorded something really quick. Said, yeah, the residents are really sure the residents were really enjoying the music, but they were doing so alone. So I felt there's something more we could do. Music is something that's supposed to bring people together. Once it was, generally safe to, go to these senior homes once again, my idea came for Sounds of Sunday as an initiative of, this bigger organization called Project Blue Star. So Project Blue Star is really an organization that I created and I developed the mission for and vision for that really seeks to decrease senior loneliness. And I think really the pandemic accentuated that problem and really brought that to light. From seeing pictures on news networks and Twitter and Instagram of seeing these old people in these retirement homes and senior homes, being isolated from their family members, waving through windows. I felt that the main idea for Sounds of Sunday and Project Blue Star really came to fruition. Over the summer, I spent some time, coding up a website, and I actually spent some time researching what the scientific literature says about decreasing loneliness, especially among seniors. Seniors in their older years, tend to become isolated. What I found is that really simple activities, just talking, playing music, just creating an ambiance of being around others can really help decrease feelings of loneliness. What are your, thoughts about us coming? Do you enjoy it?
We love it. And when the last time when you came, after you left, everybody was asking when you were coming back. They love the idea of you spending time with the little groups and doing games, and just some of these people just love the conversation with young people. Like myself, I don't have any grandchildren and I don't have any children, so I don't get a lot of company, and it's just nice to see the people in the area come in and think about us. And you can come anytime you want. So we need leaders.
Someone has just kick-started that.
That's right.
We played some music. I actually brought a quartet there. Actually, I didn't even get a chance to bring out my chessboard. We were just talking. And I think the connection we made with some of the people there, we got a really positive response. And for this upcoming event in December, I told them, we're planning to perhaps bring some choir students to do some caroling. And they got really excited about that. I think music is something that has been a part of a lot of these people's lives. We ended up playing some Beatles music. There were 10 hands up, it's Yellow Submarine. This is my family's favorite song, Finding connections between us students, we're 17, 18, right? They're perhaps over 70, over 80. There's a huge generational gap. And I think finding something in common in music, something that hopefully will bring us together, finding connections, I think, is really made possible by something like music. And that's something we love to do and they love to do as well.
So tell me a little bit, what do you think about the kids coming in and singing, performing for you?
Great. I mean, it's entertainment as far as I'm concerned. And any good entertainment meets my approval.
7:42 together.
And that concludes my superintendent's report.
That was a tearjerker, sorry. That was good. Board of Education Standing Committee reports. I think we have two. Monica, do you have a Board Development Policy and Governance report? No? Okay. And Al?
Yep. Finance Committee met on January 14th. We had one item on the agenda. It was the activities accounting report that Amy gave to us earlier, so I'm not going to go into it. And that concludes the Finance Committee report.
Okay. Last up is future agenda items. Board of Education members may suggest an item or topic for future board meeting agendas to the Board Development Policy and Governance Committee. February work session topics will include special education update, schools update, and policy readings. And our meeting is adjourned. It is 8:24 p.m. Stay warm, everybody. Thanks for watching.